The last endorsement of Charlie Kirk. Candidate for Senate in Kentucky, Nate Morris. How many coaches in the NFL, black, represents justice? How many black coaches should there be in the NFL? And searching for fraud, Russian, Armenian, mob fraud in California with Dr. Mehmet Oz. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at the Will Cain Country YouTube channel and the Will Cain Facebook page. But we're always here, whether or not you're listening on terrestrial radio or streaming live on the internet by following us at Spotify or on Apple. We've got a big show for you today. Dr. Mehmet Oz has been walking the streets of California looking for fraud, and for that, Governor Gavin Newsom has called him a racist. Not because he's looking for Somalis, but because he's looking into a Russian Armenian mob Medicare, Medicaid fraud on the streets of Van Nuys. Why would that be racist? Well, because Dr. Mehmet Oz is a Turk, because he is of Turkish descent. And with historical tensions and atrocities between the Turks and the Armenians, Governor Gavin Newsom says this is racist. It's not fraud. This is because Dr. Mehmet Oz has it out for Armenians. We'll ask Dr. Oz coming up here in just a little bit here on Will Cain Country. Coaching grades are out in the NFL. You say to me, Will, I don't care. I say to you, well, I have a question. How many black coaches in the NFL represent justice? On a biannual basis, we have a conversation in sports media about the Rooney Rule. If you're not a huge sports fan, it's essentially an affirmative action type of rule within the NFL that requires every NFL team to interview minorities before they make the ultimate decision of who their next head coach will be. And the purpose of this was to really honestly not increase the number of Lebanese head coaches like Robert Saleh, the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans. No, it was really not to ensure that you got Ron Rivera, Latino, as head coach in the NFL. It was to ensure that you got more black head coaches. And so I have a very simple proposition, a very simple question. And this really applies to anything when you talk about the concept of affirmative action. What number represents justice? Roughly 11% of the American population is black. If 11% of the head coaches were black, would that be justice? Roughly 70% of the players in the NFL are black. Does that mean there need to be 70% head coaches in the NFL to represent justice? What is the number where we realize we have arrived at a place in America where we are no longer racist? That's coming up here in just a little bit on Will Cain Country. But we start today with the last endorsement of Charlie Kirk. Nate Morris is running for Senate. It will be vacated seat of Mitch McConnell. He is running for Senate from the great state of Kentucky, and he joins us now. What's up, Nate?
Hey, Will. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you as well. I think it's hard to avoid starting with where Charlie left off. I'm just curious from a personal level and from a professional honor, what does it mean, and what was your relationship with? You're the last endorsement of him. So what does that mean for you, your relationship with Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, well, it's so special, and it's such a tremendous responsibility. You know, well, when I was looking at getting in the race, I mean, one of the people I talked to was Charlie, and I said, Charlie, what do you think about this U.S. Senate seat? And he said, Nate, this seat is so important that if you decide to do this, he said, I will come to Kentucky and I will help you launch your campaign. That's how important this is. And Charlie saw that Mitch McConnell, who's been in the seat for over 40 years, had been stabbing the president in the back, had been thwarting the will of the America First movement. And he said, we got to get it changed, Nate. And that's why he came to Kentucky to launch our campaign. And I'm so proud to be his last endorsement. And we think about that every day on the campaign trail. we think about the responsibility, and it's one of the great honors of my life. And that's why we're going to fight so hard. And when we win this race, we're going to dedicate this thing to Charlie.
What is it that you guys shared? What vision of America? What ideology? What is it that you shared with Charlie?
Yeah, we talked about so much, and I was on a show, quite a bit. And I think the biggest thing is that, Will, we're in a fight of good and evil in this country. A lot of people say it's Democrat versus Republican, but Charlie was very adamant. This is good versus evil that's going on in the United States today and around the world. And I agree with that. And I also think that Charlie was very enthusiastic about our view on immigration. Will, I've called for a full moratorium on any new immigration coming into the country until we deport every single one of these illegals. The mainstream media won't say it. Democrats won't say it. A lot of Republicans won't say it. But we were invaded under Joe Biden. We were flooded with over 20 million people we know nothing about. And a lot of people say the balance of the country hangs with if these illegals go back or not. And I agree with that. But I think more importantly, it's about Western civilization. We're fighting for our country, but we're also fighting to save Western civilization in the process.
Nate, if you're at all familiar with anything that I have ever said or any content that I've ever put out, you probably would know that you and I share a similar concern. We share a concern for the threat to Western civilization. We share a concern over mass migration, both legal and illegal, and that we have to figure out how to preserve what is the most successful and principled way of life that really has ever graced the history of humans on this planet. But I am also a realist, Nate, and I do wonder how the deportation efforts are playing politically. I'm not suggesting it that I know yet, but I do wonder. I watched this seat in Texas, just outside of Fort Worth. It went heavily for Donald Trump. It's been Republican since the 1990s, and a Democrat just took a special election. And everybody's trying to sort it out, Nate. They're trying to figure it out. Why did this happen? How did this happen? What played? And there are many who think, well, this is because of what people are seeing on the streets of Minneapolis. This is what people think of ICE. I'm curious, because you're a realist. You have to be when you're running for office. You very least have to look at data. You're probably aware of polls. What is the public's attitude, and what does that mean for your race in Kentucky right now towards deportation?
I mean, look, Will, it's really simple. I mean, we've even seen the polls. I mean, the American people are overwhelmingly in support. I mean, CNN ran a whole segment on this, that every illegal's got to go back. And there's going to be some tough conversations. There's got to be a lot of tough action. And quite frankly, Will, I don't think we can get tough enough. We've got to double down our efforts. I mean, this nonsense going on in Minnesota, it's not lost on me that it seems like all the trouble that's been stirred up in our country lately comes from Minnesota. And it's clowns like Tim Walz that have put our country into having these difficult conversations because of his lack of leadership and because he thwarts the president, he thwarts ICE every chance he gets. And, let's remember all the turmoil that was caused in 2020. It all came out of Minnesota. And the same people that are crying about ICE were the same people that were promoting Black Lives Matter, that were promoting defund the police and all this nonsense that we knew was a complete sham. And so, Will, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think we can get tough enough. And that's why this moratorium's got to happen. We got to take a pause. Every illegal's got to go back. And I don't, the circumstances really don't matter at this point. Western civilization hangs in the balance, and we got to keep charging and be more forceful than ever.
I totally agree. Do you worry, though, Nate, that the public will say to a pollster, yes, I believe if you're here illegally, you should return to your home country, but then recoil at the enforcement of that opinion, recoil at the enforcement of that law? Do you worry that people say one thing and not even think one thing until the rubber meets the road, until the niceties turn into the physical force of deportation?
Well, Will, I don't really care about what the polls say. I know what we've got to do to save the country. And we've got to get every illegal to go back to save this country. Because if not, I mean, you look over at the United Kingdom. I mean, I'm a garbage man by trade. I built one of the largest waste management companies in the United States. Well, garbage took me all over the world. And I tell you, I spent some time in the United Kingdom. Their country's gone. Their country is absolutely gone. My friend JD Vance said that they will be the first Islamic nation in the next decade to have a nuclear weapon. And that's because of mass migration and having wide open borders. And the same thinking that created all that mess and allowed Europe to fall is coming here to the United States. And that's why we got to get so tough. And look, I think that there's going to be tough conversations. There's going to be tough calls that we have to make, but we can't get tough enough because so much hangs in the balance to save the country. And Charlie knew this. I think that's why he became so supportive of our candidacy, and that's why he went all in. And this was his last endorsement, as he knew that I was going to be willing to fight. I'm not a politician, Will. I've never run for office. I don't need the job. I don't need the money. I'm funding a lot of this thing myself. I felt like if I didn't get in the race, we were going to have, one of Mitch McConnell's cronies and a career politician continue to run this country off a cliff. And that's why we need people that are willing to go to the Senate and fight. And that's why I'm in this race, and that's why we're going to win this election.
I totally agree, Nate. And I think that how you characterize that and talking about what JD has pointed out about the UK paints this accurately as an existential fight for Western civilization. I think when I ask you about the poll and I ask you about the pulse of the public, what I'm then transitioning into is a conversation about salesmanship and electability. Ultimately, we have to get 51% of the people to agree or see this through the same lens that you or I see this. And I don't know. Maybe they already do, Nate. Maybe they do. And the polls are all off. And the celebrities at the Grammys represent a radical minority. And I'm not an expert on polling. I'm not an expert. I don't think that I know at any given moment exactly where the public stands. I more firmly plant my feet on principle and hope that I can persuade from the position of the principle. But I do wonder, and that's why I've never run for office, Nate, and I don't know that I ever will. But that is sort of the calculation you constantly have to make as a man who runs for office, right? Can I sell my principle? Where is the public? And I do wonder with the public right now. I don't think, for the record, Nate, I don't think that Billie Eilish represents the average American. I don't think she represents the opinion of 51%
I agree with you, Will.
of Americans.
Yeah.
But you know who I do worry about, Nate? I do worry about that suburban mom that listens to Billie Eilish, that might someday vote red and on other days vote blue, who might post a black box on Instagram when the entire world is losing its mind over race, but at other times goes, yeah, there's no way that girls or boys should play in girls' sports. And so I wonder about your job and my job in selling this existential crisis of Western civilization to that mom that is necessary for you to hold power in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, look, Will, as a leader and as a party, we have to clearly articulate what's at stake here. And obviously we know that's Western civilization, but let's also talk about the folks, the mothers that are out there, and think about the young people, their children that are trying to get opportunity, that are trying to get access to the economy, trying to get a job, trying to get housing, trying to get the education that they need. Illegal immigration compromises all of that. Illegal immigrants take away opportunities from law-abiding American citizens, and in many cases, American citizens that have been here for many generations helping to build this country. And all the nonsense, for instance, that we see in Minnesota, the Somali case, I mean, they're taking away from law-abiding American citizens. And that's absolutely unacceptable. And look, I'll take the folks that I meet on the campaign trail every day around Kentucky. I'll listen to them any day over what Bad Bunny has to say. I don't really care what Bad Bunny has to say because, he doesn't have an authentic American experience in middle America and have to deal with things like NAFTA and have to deal with China entering the WTO and watching your jobs go overseas and watching your family hurt. He hasn't seen that. So shame on him. And, he needs to stick to singing and performing, and we'll take care of the policy.
You know what? In the past, Nate, what I would have said is the best way to sell what you just described is to say that illegal immigrant, illegal immigrant, criminal or simply illegal, takes away not just from the abstraction of the average American, but takes away from your child. It takes away the educational resources in
Yeah.
the public school from your child. It takes away the medical services that are paid for through communal tax dollars from your child. And you would hope that the mama bear inside that mother would understand the lesson, understand the principle through the lens of their own children. But concerningly, Nate, we see a growth. I think this is accurate. We see a growth in mothers really willing to sacrifice the interest of their own children for the public virtue signal of their own reputation. Whether or not that's embracing, hormonal treatments and trans nonsense, or it's allowing elementary school teachers to march their kids out of school in education learning environments for hours on end to go yell, kindness is the way on the streets of Austin, or name your city in solidarity with Minneapolis. I don't know that those moms still are the ones that you're trying to reach, but I am concerned that this public virtue signaling, this toxic empathy, has pulled a lot of women even away from the protection of their own children.
Well, and that's why, again, Will, I have been so forceful in discussing this issue and showcasing to the people of Kentucky and the people of this country that this issue of deporting these illegals has got to happen, because they are compromising generations of their family, their futures, their job prospects, their education, their health care, because they allow these illegals to stay and they don't get tough. We got to get so tough because, look, we know that if people have a job, that solves a lot of problems, Will. People have economic opportunity and they see hope. But, these illegals that come in and take opportunity and take away resources from law-abiding citizens, that doesn't provide a lot of hope for folks here in the middle of the country that are trying to make a better way and trying to build on what the previous generation did. And so I think this issue is so important. And that's why we're going to continue to lead on this and communicate directly to the Kentuckians and to the people around this country of why this has got to happen and why we got to save this country by getting tough.
So you brought up economics. I want to talk to you for a moment about economics. President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Charlie Kirk, myself, yourself, I think it's a fair characterization to say that over the last 10 years, there's been an embrace on the right of a certain level of economic populism. The idea that not capitalism, but corporatism, the perversion of capitalism, has left behind the average American, has left behind the blue-collar worker. And we need to have leadership that understands you can't have a bifurcated society. You can't have elites and hollow out the middle class and leave the poverty. That you have to have a system that works on whole for the average American. But populism, as it's often famously said, is a fire that can burn out of control. It can warm you or it can burn you down. And the left has embraced a similar kind of, not a similar, but it has embraced populism in a different kind of way. Mamdani, rent control, maybe basic level income, universal income, obviously public health care. How do you distinguish what you see, a vision of economic populism that doesn't burn out of control into Mamdani style populism?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Will, but what I'll say is, I'm so proud. Will, I was raised by a single mom. We were on food stamps. We struggled financially. I had a dad that left when I was very young. And I had 19 of my family members working in an auto plant in Kentucky. I mean, we built cars and trucks for a living. And I'm proud that right now we're living in a time in our country's history where we can celebrate the American worker again because of President Trump. But we can't forget some of these terrible policies that the elites have put on working class people, like NAFTA and China entering the WTO. I mean, these are two things that I saw firsthand. People I knew lost their job immediately because they had career politicians. They had people that were disconnected from the middle of the country, from a working class experience, create these policies that didn't benefit the American people and didn't help create a better life for our people and for the next generation. And that's why, I'm so adamant about this seat, going to Washington, going to the Senate, as a job creator. Will, I've created thousands of jobs in my career. I started with $10,000 on a credit card and built a company to $700 million in revenue, took it public on the New York Stock Exchange. I've seen every facet of entrepreneurship, small business growth. And we got to have people that understand how to create jobs. We got to have people that understand and have a relationship with working class Americans and what that's like to struggle and to fight. Because let me tell you, a lot of these people in Washington, D.C., they have no idea what that's like. They have no idea what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck. They've only signed the back. And so I think, again, we've had a lack of leadership, and somebody I'll be replacing, been in the Senate for over 40 years, Will. I mean, he's been in there before the internet was created. I mean, what do you possibly know about creating jobs in this economy and building people up and giving people opportunity? But I think we've got to stay focused on working class Americans. They've been hurting, and they hurt so bad under Joe Biden. I hear all the time, Nate, you have no idea what I'm going through right now. I can barely buy groceries. I can't pay my light bill. And that's because of the inflation that was put on working class Americans because of Joe Biden's spending. And we've also got to have people that understand that and can't spend out of control like we've had under Joe Biden. And thank God for President Trump, because he's curbing that inflation and helping our country get back on track and get the economy going again and giving everybody confidence that a better day's ahead.
All right, Nate Moritz, you're running against Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron. It's Mitch McConnell's seat in Kentucky. He's the last endorsement of Charlie Kirk. And laying out a vision, I think, is fairly characterized when it comes to immigration or economics as America first. I think that's ultimately the way to characterize what we just talked about here for the last 20 minutes. Nate, it's been great to talk to you. I hope to see more of you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Will. It's so good to be with you and your listeners.
All right. Thank you so much. There's Nate Morris running for Senate in the great state of Kentucky. Two-a-days Dan, tinfoil Pat with us here today. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be joined by Dr. Mehmet Oz, administrator of Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, who's looking at fraud in the state of California. And about time. This Minneapolis and Minnesota story has to go beyond, and we all seem to intuitively in a gut instinct think you've got to turn to California. Not exclusively, but it's like the drug cartel thing. I think I had my finger on the pulse of it when I said, if you're going after drug cartels, do you really start in Venezuela or do you start in Mexico? And I think that was validated ultimately that Venezuela was about much more than narco boats in the Caribbean. I think that's been validated. If you're going after fraud, the Mexican cartel of fraud, the Sinaloa cartel, has to be in California. So, yeah, we should look into it everywhere else as well. But if you're going for the bulk, if you're going to the place where the rats are nesting, not picking them off as they run along the streets of New York, but you're going to the nest. The nest has to be
messy place
in California. So we're going to ask that in just a moment with Dr. Mehmet Oz. But the story out of the NFL is the number of coaches, 10 coaching vacancies, right? This hiring cycle. And 0 of those coaching vacancies have gone to coaches who are black. I don't use the modern day term of people of color because does Robert Saleh not count? Right? I mean, does he not count as a person of color? No one's counting him as that. So, yeah, right. He's Lebanese. Yeah. Robert Saleh's Lebanese. And so we have to be specific, as I was a little bit earlier. They don't really mean persons of color, the critics of the NFL's hiring policies. They don't count. Like Ron Rivera, when Ron Rivera is hired, you can almost feel the air let out of the balloon. Wow, that's not exactly what we were talking about.
Close, but
And by the way, Patrick makes a great point, and I've got to looking at this. Okay, by the way, here's how many black coaches there are in the NFL. Technically, the way that everybody is saying it, there are 3 black coaches in the NFL right now. That is D'Amico Ryans, Houston Texans. It's Todd Bowles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's Aaron Glenn, New York Jets. But nobody is counting, and he's not a head coach anymore, but he was, Mike McDaniel, former head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And it is interesting. He's never counted. I feel like he's never on the lists. And to be fair, even when you say it, I'm like, wait, Mike McDaniel's black? But he is black. Like, he's half black. His dad was black. His mom was white. I just looked it up.
I did not know that.
Right? Because they don't count him and they don't talk about it.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Here's a question, Tooz. Why? That doesn't make any sense. Patrick Mahomes is counted as a black quarterback, is he not? He's half black, half white. I think he's the exact same scenario. Black dad, white mom.
Russ Wilson?
Patrick Mahomes is counted. Yeah, Russ Wilson. Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd is counted as black as a player and now as a coach. And he's as light-skinned as Mike McDaniel. So what's the deal? Like, why does Mike McDaniel not get counted? Why does I'd love to figure this out.
I do love Miami Mike, though.
What is the deal? Is it the glasses?
It might be.
I don't understand.
Yeah. That was really funny.
But, all right, so right now, because it's Super Bowl week, and this hiring cycle has just gone through, and coaching grades are coming out, by the way. This is presented by Poly Market. Coaching grades for the 10 teams, 9 teams at this point, on this coaching list, at least in this. That's not nice. Look at these grades. They gave A through D, 2 A's, 1 B, 3 C's, 2 D's, and then they gave the Pittsburgh Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy a WTF.
I can agree as a Packer fan.
Mike McCarthy has to be one of the most disrespected coaching candidate head coaches in the history of football. Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers. By the way, then a Dallas Cowboy head coach, and I believe in his seasons with the Cowboys, he won like 10, 11 games almost every year, and everybody here thinks he was a disappointment, right? And now the world is going, ho-hum, the Steelers hired Mike McCarthy, what a letdown. Like, if you're Mike McCarthy, you got to be sitting there going, just like Mike McDaniel sitting around going, I'm not black. Mike McCarthy's going, I'm a WTF hire? Why am I a WTF hire?
174 and 112 as a head coach.
Which is great.
Yeah.
But he's sitting there going, wait a minute, Joe Brady gets a B, and I got a WTF. I won a Super Bowl. I've won 170 games in the NFL. Like, why am I the WTF? I agree with that.
I think Aaron Rodgers ruined it for him.
I'm with you, Mike. Well, he's going to be now. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to come back to the Steelers, but now they're back together, and I think Rodgers gave him an endorsement. But if you're not familiar with these names, none of these guys are black. These new head coaches in the NFL. So everybody's making a deal. 0 for 10 in this hiring cycle. And so it's an article at Super Bowl weeks. It's being asked of Roger Goodell, why, what can the league do? And for the record, here's what the league does. The league has the Rooney Rule. And if you're listening, you're not that big a sports fan. I don't care about NFL head coaches. I do think you should care. I think this is an interesting cultural debate. It's an interesting affirmative action debate. It's an interesting societal debate, okay? So the NFL requires every team to interview a minority before they make a hire. That's called the Rooney Rule. And the idea is that it gives minority candidates exposure to the hiring practice, the employers, a.k.a. the owners in the NFL. Because the argument is, well, back then, there's not black head coaches because they're not even getting interviewed. They don't have the relationships. They're not getting to know the owners. So they put in the Rooney Rule, and you have to – and it now applies, I believe, to offensive and defensive coordinator as well. It's not just head coach. And it hasn't changed that much, the Rooney Rule. It hasn't changed the numbers and the hiring practices. But here's the question I have, and I've gone back to this every time, and I'm going to ask you guys this, two-a-days and tinfoil Pat. What number represents justice? This is the debate on DEI as well, right? When it's like we're going to have hiring practices across corporate America. I am dead serious curious because that's never been quantified. It seems like that would have to be a bar you would have to set, right? If we think X, and we'll define X together in a moment, represents a healthy and just ecosystem, and therefore if you fall below, something is askew, and probably not fall below on a singular occasion, but continuously. You see what I'm saying? Okay, let's just pick a number, 20%. If 20% represents equilibrium, justice, then you wouldn't go, well, this year we fell below the 20%. You'd have to go, we're continually falling below the 20%. We're continually falling below. And then you'd raise your eyebrows and go, why? Right? But you have to establish that number. And it's never established. Not on ESPN, not on the talk shows, not with the NFL. My question is, how can you have a conversation about injustice if you can't define justice? You see what I mean? What I said earlier. I believe the black population of America is between 11 and 13%. Does that mean justice is 11 to 13% of the coaches being black? No, that's ridiculous, Will, because 70% of the league and the players are black. Okay, well, hold on for a second. That requires me to assume players and coaches are one and the same. They're not. There is overlap. A lot of times players go into coaching. Sometimes coaches have never played. But there's some overlap, but it's certainly not one for one.
I think that gets people.
But so I don't think 70% can reasonably be argued to be justice equilibrium. So what is the number? What is the number that represents justice? I'm genuinely curious. Because I think, 2 days, I'll let you answer this. I saw you had your hand up. I think the idea of there not being a number actually allows the conversation and the grievance to continue. That's my point. I don't think there's really any interest in defining justice, because if you define justice, then you can never scream, or you have to be accountable when you scream injustice.
That's what we don't know what it is, and that therefore it just should be that way. And I also think what you said about the 70% of the league being black also, I think that throws people off, being like, hey, wait, this doesn't seem right, as just as optics. But yeah, I think there is no number that you can throw out there.
Well, okay, there's this as well, and we always under-index this. I set aside the racial prism. I've had conversations. Why is the media liberal, right? Why is the oil and gas industry kind of conservative? And there's a lot of things that go into that, like geography. At least historically, much of the media was always centered in New York, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. And people that live in those places and people that move to those places often tend to be more liberal. Okay, so that's in the recipe. But the biggest one that is always underappreciated is self-selection mechanism. Who chooses to go into those businesses, right? And, for example, in my business, in this business, definitely historically, people that are left-leaning choose to go into media. More so than people that are right-leaning. Why? Well, because quite honestly, there's this ideology or mindset. Is it H.L. Mencken is sort of like a lot of people in media would point to him as sort of the patron saint of media, and he said something like the purpose of media is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. That's certainly not how I view the role of the media. That's a kind of a lefty idea. I'm going to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. My job, I think, is to tell the truth. It's not very complicated. It's sort of, here, tell the truth. And so if the vast majority of people that go into this business think the idea is that you are supposed to afflict the comfortable, then you're going to do everything through that lens, and then people self-select into that business. Same thing, if you go into oil and gas, who the men and women choosing to go into oil and gas? They tend to have more conservative leanings. Finance is a weird one, by the way. Finance is sort of
I think
weird
people become conservative going into finance.
I don't know. I don't think that's true.
Really?
I think they might start out conservative. I think they actually start out conservative. Or they're conservative in the middle ground of their career. 2 days. There is a thing that happens among the very wealthy where they begin to adopt liberal ideas as a handbag. It's almost like collecting dude. You've never been this liberal your whole life, but now you're super rich, so you are. Why?
You think the opposite.
Maybe guilt. No, maybe guilt over how much you've made. Or it is like wearing designer clothes. At some point, it becomes like wearing designer clothes.
Interesting.
Have you seen my handbag? Have you seen my trans kid? Or have you seen
My
how I
inclusivity?
feel about my own virtue, my inclusivity? Have you seen my sign in my yard?
Yeah.
There's a thing that happens at a certain wealth level where liberal ideas are like a fancy car.
Interesting.
You drive a Jaguar, and you believe that no one is illegal.
A pink one.
Like those things do have some overlap, and I find it particularly in this sort of finance world. I feel like more so than other industries. But my point in all of this is, in coaching, there's also self-selection mechanism. Who chooses to go in to be coaches? And I'm not talking about who chooses and wants to be an NFL coach, like any industry. Who's ready to go be a graduate assistant? Who's ready to go be a quarterback's coach? Who's ready to coach in high school? Who's ready to coach in college? And who wants to work their way up? And there is some racial self-selection mechanism in who is feeding that pipeline of coaches. And I'm not saying it's 100-0. I'm just saying there are a lot of reasons why these numbers end up the way they do. You can take what I say and believe it or not, or you can just take this. Racist! Like that's what the counter argument is. Racist! Not complicated. You don't have to think much beyond it. It's simple. That's the beginning and the end of the argument.
I don't know why, but you
Racist! So, like, all the things I've laid out to you. Too many words. This dude, too many words. I always suspected this guy on NFL, on ESPN. Listen to him making all these excuses. Racist. You're right. You know what? In the end, it could just be there's 32 racists who have no interest in winning. And just like, I'm not going to pick the best guy for the job. No.
No,
I don't want the best guy.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. We'll try not to do that. See what happens.
Well, 7 of the teams that
Anyway, that's
had those openings, 7 of the 10 teams have hired black coaches in the past. That's something that people don't really. It's like, why would they be racist now when they've already done it before?
It's what have you done for me lately is the mentality.
Well, that's my whole point, though. No, they're counting, Patrick. You're exactly right. They're not counting that. They're counting right now. It's a game every year. What number were hired and what number is the total number in the league. Right now, it's 3 out of 32, so that's 10%, right? 10% for next year. Counting Robert Saleh, if we're doing people of color, it's 4 out of 32. So what is the number that represents true justice? What is the number that represents equilibrium? Is it 20%, 70%?
At least 8.
Is it the national average of 11 to 13%? What is the number? And by the way, if we're doing this, well, what percentage of the United States population is Asian? Do we have that when it comes to coaches?
I just pulled up.
What percentage of the country is white?
Hispanic-
What about
Hispanic
is Cooper
population is
DeJean
19
carrying
to
the
20.
full weight of white? The Asian population?
The Hispanic population is about 20% of the population. How many Hispanic
There ain't
head
20
coaches are there?
Not
I think we're
enough.
at 0 right now, right?
Not enough.
0. Yeah.
Right.
0 Asians. Right? Are we at 0 Asians? I think so. Same thing with cornerbacks. Cooper DeJean's carrying a lot of weight on the whole population percentage thing when it comes to cornerbacks and defensive backs in the NFL. We need to measure that, like, for perfect societal representation.
Do we just
What
care?
is- what is justice?
Do we just care about this in the NFL? Is that it? Or do people get up in arms like this for all the other sports? Because it can't be as diverse in other sports more than it is the NFL.
I think the NBA is more diverse.
It is. It is in the NBA. Yeah, the NBA
well,
is
I
more
know,
diverse.
but like, do they care about baseball? Managers.
Boy, baseball sure flies under the radar, right?
Yeah.
Like
Why is no one up in arms?
I
about
remember when
that?
I joined ESPN, a guy told me when I joined ESPN, Will, you should do a story on what happened to the black baseball player. Like, they're gone. Like in the 70s, that was a good percentage of the league, And now, and I mean, that's an interesting conversation about young black kids not choosing baseball, choosing basketball or whatever it may be, good athletes not wanting to play baseball anymore.
5%.
And that's pretty dang fascinating, right?
No, but it's African American.
5%?
5 to 6% are black players in Major League Baseball.
No, but that's African American though.
In
Yes.
we still have
No, I know.
Hispanic
I'm
black.
just talking about African American, not
No, but that's what we're talking
Right.
about, Patrick.
yeah.
Yeah. I just want to make sure.
Not
I want to clarify
not
for the
Hispanic
audience.
players. It is minority. 39% minority is the league. 60% white.
Wait, so 5% African American in Major League Baseball? What was it in the 70s? Can you look that up? Let's guess before he gets it. 30%. 30% of
Sounds
Major League
fair.
Baseball in the 1970s African American?
It is 16 to 19%.
16 to 19%. Still a big drop.
Yeah.
Still a big drop.
But
By the way,
no one
are you
cares.
screaming racism about that?
Yeah.
Is anybody screaming racism about that?
yeah.
No.
I read a
because
thing
it's more
15 years ago. They
complicated.
were. CC Sabathia was getting out there. They were like, "We got to get kids on the streets." Yeah, they were. It was a big deal like a few years ago.
Well, but that's not screaming that they're not hiring black players in defiance of merit
Or
because of
managers.
racism, but that's what we do when it comes to coaching. They understand and acknowledge it's more complicated when it comes to what's happened in baseball over the last 40 years. Might it be similar when it comes to coaching? Might it be more complicated or racist?
But that means it's because there are
Might there?
70% black players in the NFL, right? So that's the reason why. People get
Why
up in
what?
arms. People get up in arms about the coaching because they don't care about it
I
in
mean, I
baseball
guess
or hockey.
they think that I think that correlation.
yeah.
They draw an absolute correlation between those two stats with no complicating factors in between, like
That's it.
who's choosing to go into coaching versus who's going into the broadcast booth versus who's going into retirement versus who's doing whatever they want after their playing career. All right, this is a good opportunity, I think, for us to take a quick break. When we come back, Two-A-Days Dan and Tinfoil Pat have forwarded me a headline that I swear that I have seen no less than 3 times. It's incredibly grotesque and dangerous, and I don't understand if we're all telling the same story over and over again because I don't know how this could be happening more than once. And Dr. Mehmet Oz on the fraud in California coming up on Will Cain Country. Dr. Mehmet Oz, administrator of CMS, joining us in just a moment. He has gone to California and he sees a connection. He's investigating Russian-Armenian mafia in Medicare and Medicaid fraud in California. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at the Will Cain Country YouTube channel, Facebook, and always available by subscribing on Spotify or on Apple. I swear that I've seen this headline from Dan and Patrick like a year or two ago.
You may have.
I'm holding back a sneeze. If you wonder what I'm doing with my face, I'm trying
God
to
bless
hold
you.
back a sneeze. It's really bad for you, right? Just let her fly, baby.
Gotta go. Your eyes can just pop out.
Put the headline up.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what happens when you keep your eyes open when you sneeze, right?
Oh yeah,
It's up on the screen.
it's up on
New York
okay.
Post.
Found a third one.
New York Post. Hospital evacuated after 8-inch World War I artillery shell discovered in patient's butt. This is... Here's the thing about this headline. I've seen this before, fellas. I swear. A year ago, I saw a similar story. Dan, you got to fact check me on this. This story has come up more than once.
So you're right.
What are you doing, Patrick? Are you holding up 8 inches? Is that what you're
I
doing?
was
with your
thinking
fingers?
like it's like 8 inches, so it was like
There's a
this
joke in there somewhere.
around, right? So it's this diameter, roughly, okay. But I was thinking like when I first read it, I was thinking 8 inches, but it's like no, this is a mortar round. This is like a big
8 inches. 8 inches
Shell.
in length, surely, not
no.
diameter.
I think diameter.
Come on.
This is artillery. This is an artillery shell.
There's no way. I bet you my hand is about 6 inches. So another 2 inches diameter. No way, man. That can't. No way.
I don't know.
Right?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It says 8 inches long, so it was length. Okay. So
Okay.
it's,
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
Ooh.
There-
Okay. Okay. Really quickly.
I found it.
Dr. Oz is on hold. And I don't want Dr. Oz waiting while we discover the truth and the details behind this story.
Hello,
but
sir.
I do want this before we get to Dr. Oz. 2 days. This has come up more than once.
Yeah.
Which tells me this is a little bit of a thing. Has this happened twice, 3 times? And I'm talking an artillery shell from one of the world wars. I can't vouch that it was World War I. Could have been World War II before. Has been found in a patient's rectum at the hospital, forcing the hospital to like clear out. Tell me if I'm right. Has this happened more than once?
Yes, it has. So, article in 2021, bomb squad called to hospital after man gets World War II mortar stuck in his rectum. So that's from 2021. So this has happened before.
Is this a thing? Is there a Reddit sub-community
I don't know
that is into
happening.
this? Is this the same guy? We need to find out if it's the same guy. That would be key. Is this guy? Or is there this community? Because this is not... The details are random enough that you would not expect it
Fantasy
to repeat
football
itself. But
losses?
it has now. And I'm... punishment? Fantasy football punishment?
Yeah.
I am wondering if we have a problem. You know, once, shame on you. Twice, shame on me. The me in this case is America. We've got to figure out what's going on in America. We've got to figure out what's going on in California as well. Dr. Mehmet Oz is administrator for Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, and he has been in California. He has been on the streets, I believe, of Van Nuys, looking into some fraud, which, by the way, Dr. Oz, shame on you. Shame on you for caring about fraud. As it turns out, according to California Governor Newsom, this reveals you are a racist.
Yeah, but I thought you had a little video of the governor accusing me, because I keep hearing it all over the place. But what I'm not hearing from Governor Newsom is any really strategically wise plan of dealing with the massive fraud that's hurting the most vulnerable people in California. And just so everyone's on the same page here, we've been all over the country. I've been to South Florida, where we've got a problem that's, I think, driven by a lot of the Cuban community that might be supported by the Cuban government. That's around durable medical equipment, wheelchairs, knee braces. We've got the obvious problem in Minnesota, where we've been visiting, and the Somalian community there and others as well have been defrauding the government, generating 100 times more bills for example, autism than they had expected. Why? Because they've declared every child in the state to have the condition, so they're funding it, even though it's really, we believe, mostly fraudulent. But LA is sort of the epicenter. And LA is a cautionary tale, because we've known for a while that there was a sevenfold increase in hospice. Again, hospice is something you go into when you're in your last 6 months of life. Theoretically, you're dying of some condition like cancer. It's a very delicate time. You want to give people the care they need, but you take them off Medicare. You take away their other insurance to give them the hospice management. And when you pull people into hospice dishonestly, when you trick them, they lose their Medicare coverage. So when they actually get illnesses because they're not really dying of a problem, they shouldn't have been in hospice, you can't take care of them. And we've had folks, I've met families of Governor Newsom's actions are costing the taxpayers a lot of money, but more importantly, they're costing Americans lives. The question, and I'm asking this to everybody, maybe you have an answer, Will, is why? Like, why is he tolerating this? Who benefits? I went and visited a Russian community where by the way, the leader of the mafia, who was responsible for a lot of the hospice fraud, fled the country when the DOJ came after him, went back to Russia. But we've got a Russian community involved, but other groups as well. It's become endemic because of the hospice fraud being tolerated. Now it's spread to home health care. When there was an effort to try to slow this down, those fraudsters went over to Nevada. I went to Nevada. Vegas has got the same problem. It's a copycat, just a small JV version of California. It spread to New Mexico, to Arizona. It spread to Texas. So if we don't stomp this out, these bad guys realize they can make money off Medicaid and Medicare. Foreign countries are involved, and foreign nationals are engaged in this process because they don't care about our country. We're not going to tolerate that. The president is livid about this. He's appropriately going after all these states where we seem to tolerate some of these fraudulent activities, and some of it is just directly against the national interest. They can tolerate the tolerance for illegal immigrants getting full health benefits, including vision and dental, things you don't get on Medicare even. We don't give that to Medicaid patients in other parts of the country. But in California, if you're here illegally, you get it all. And we've actually gone after California and collected back $1.6 billion. Not all of it back yet. We're going to get it all, but we've got probably half that money already back in the federal coffers. So California's admitting that they were doing this wrong.
Well, I want to try to answer your question, and I have several follow-ups from what you just said, but I want to explain to the audience, and I'm sure you know, and I want to let you address what Governor Gavin Newsom is saying. The reason I jokingly said that you're looking into fraud and that makes you a racist is that the claim is you are looking into a tie in your investigation allegations between the Russian Armenian mafia, Armenian community in certain areas of Los Angeles, Medicare, Medicaid fraud, and you are of Turkish descent. So what Newsom is tying into there is historical ties and problems between Turkey and Armenia, Turkish citizens and Armenian citizens. And he is insinuating that is bled over into America, into your investigation into fraud.
You know, he can make those accusations, and I hope the audience probably feels the same way that I do, which is, fine, make whatever allegations you desire. Just do your job. You know, go in there, deal with the fraud, protect the vulnerable. You know, I'm sitting here in Washington in the Humphreys building. Hubert Humphrey has a beautiful quote at the entranceway. It says it's the moral obligation of government, including the California leadership, to take care of those at the dawn of their life, children. 53% of kids are covered by Medicaid and CHIP, programs I administer. You have to take care of people at the twilight of their life, you know, older folks, especially if they're having disabilities. And you got to take care of people who are living in the shadows, folks with substance use disorder, you know, lots of conditions that we're going to cost money for communities. But we're a great nation. We're going to take care of our most vulnerable. When you tolerate widespread, systemic, organized fraud, you're causing a problem. And these allegations are not me just, you know, making up the numbers. I actually am looking at the numbers. It's my job to pay the bills. We think there's probably $3.5 billion of fraud just in Los Angeles. Forget about California, just in LA around hospice and home health care. We believe that there are people being hurt. I've gotten whistleblower notices, but what they're really saying when I met with the community leaders in LA is, why is no one listening to us? We're crying for help. Right. In fairness, people in other states, like home health care providers, saying they're getting squeezed on because there's so much fraud in LA that there's not enough money to go around. 9% of all the money we spend in America on home health care is spent in Los Angeles. That's 5 times more than you would expect. And that means there's less money for home health care in other states. And you've got taxpayers in New Mexico, which is, again, a blue state. Right? Taxpayers in New Mexico, but a state that's not that affluent compared to California, are paying taxes, federal taxes, that go to support fraud in Los Angeles. It's just morally wrong. It's reprehensible. And the fact that the governor won't deal with the problem and instead accuses me, which is just wasting everyone's time. Fix the problem, help your people.
Is the answer to your question, why is this tolerated? Is it the same thing that we suspect in Minnesota, that there is political advantage for allowing this to go on? So obviously in Minnesota, there should be, and I hope there continues to be, investigation into the political payoff, which could simply come in the form of voter turnout, voter allegiances. It could be more complex for the political leadership of Minnesota to allow this fraud to go on within the Somali communities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. You brought up Cubans, and you're looking at something in Florida. You're looking at this Russian-Armenian thing in L.A. Is the answer somehow then tied to the political payoff of whoever that may be, the leadership in California, including Gavin Newsom?
I think this is weaponized political patronage. Let's just take what happened in Minnesota as a good example. Actually, let me just take a step back. I don't know if you know this, Will, but by federal law, if we sign you up for Medicaid, we also have to offer you the option to sign up to vote. So it's a voter enrollment process. Now think about this. If I went to an NRA convention and was legally obliged to sign up everybody to vote, I'm signing up Republicans. You're signing up people who are taking health benefits in this country, and I'm now signing them up to vote. There's a good chance the people giving you those health benefits, especially if they're not checking very carefully if you deserve them, are going to vote for you. We saw that happen, we believe, in Minnesota. We're seeing it in California, where there's other factors at play as well. We even have union involvement in some of these decisions that makes me concerned that this is just a big rotating circle where everyone is getting a little bit of their opportunity to eat, so sit at the trough and eat, but they all benefit the broader ecosystem that's been built there. The amount of fraud, Will, is hard to explain. It's so rampant right now that had a whistleblower doctor who is running 5 hospices, which, by the way, in itself, you should never be able to do. Why do I need 5? Why can't I run 1 hospice and make it big? Why do I have to have 5 hospices? The reason is because you keep the numbers in each hospice small, so they're below the threshold for the government to check. They don't have to report to us what their outcomes are. Remember, many of these hospices, they're all supposed to have, people who are at the end of their life, they have 100% survival rates, 100%. I mean, that's better survival rate than you and I have for 6 months. So there's obviously something going wrong. But this whistleblower, is building a massive, beautiful house with all the money, his ill-gotten gains. And the plumber comes in and says, hey, listen, I hear you made the money to build this house with hospice. I've got a side hustle. I own a hospice too, the plumber. And then the carpenter overhears the conversation and says, you know what, me too. I got a side hustle hospice. Everybody, the owner of the house and the contractors all own hospices. This is what's going on. We've no longer is there a fear that someone's checking on you. And that's why I'm concerned that we've normalized fraud. And as it gets weaponized, because it does have political patronage as an opportunity, we open our flank for foreign governments to play a role. We know there are foreign nationals involved, our foreign governments involved. I've heard those accusations about Cuba. I've heard them about Russia. I have not heard it about Somalia, but I do believe the money's going back to Somalia and may have the ability to do other untoward things there because of that.
Okay, I have 2 follow-ups quickly, Dr. Oz. Let's talk about the role of immigrant or minority communities in some of this fraud. Is the suggestion then the reason this proliferates in say a given community? It's because a model is created. I've certainly heard this when it comes to the Somali thing, right? I've interviewed men who are immigrants from Somalia. I interviewed a man from Maine. He talks about the cultural push into this corruption, into living a life off of the welfare system, not just as a taker, but as a business enterprise as well. Is it that like a model is created and that model proliferates state to state or community to community within these? I don't know if they're all immigrant. I don't know if, whatever, these racially homogenous or ethnically distinct communities, a model is created and it's proliferated.
Will, I think you did a beautiful job articulating what we're thinking. I can't prove it, but a lot of Medicaid money is spent for home and community services. Let me explain what that means. Normally, you think we're paying for hernia operations, right? That's not where a lot of the money is going. It's going to pay for things your family used to do for you. You carry the groceries up the stairs, negotiate your rent or your contract for your rental property, taking you into a home after you've had a procedure done. These are things your family would do for you, right? Now, if it's only a family working with a family and you get to decide who is helping you and you pick your neighbor's son and they pick your son, pretty much everybody in the community is being employed to work for the generation above them. We have states in America where the #1 job is home health care aid. It's become bigger than retail sales. It's the #1 way you get a paycheck. So you're now creating an entire infrastructure. Now, within a homogenous community, it's a little easier to game the system. We're going to pay all the parents to tell us this honestly, that their kids have autism. Or we're all going to have the kids drive us to our clinic appointments, charge a couple $100 per drive, and then collect that money and split it with the next generation. This is what's happening. And it's a business model. And it's not a flaw that it's prone to fraud. It's actually a feature. It's a great way to making money. There were people in Philadelphia opening home health care facilities and child care facilities in Minnesota because it was a great business model. They don't have to have anybody actually walking through the doors. You're just charging money to the government. If you got a system for doing that and you get paid, you can buy a new house, bigger car. I hear this, by the way, all over the country. And we've only talked about a few states now. I won't regale you, but my job is to see all the numbers. So we can sort of tell when all of a sudden it's a lot more expensive to deal with Medicaid population in one state versus another. And that's happening often because there's fraud involved, not because you have more people needing services.
Do you think that your job is the one where? So, I would have to guess, Dr. Oz, and I don't think this is just an uneducated guess. Medicare and Medicaid are the biggest homes for fraud in governmental spending. I'm just thinking if there's anything else I need to throw in there as a caveat. I think obviously the defense industrial complex needs to be analyzed, but and it's not exclusive to these minority communities. That would be my presumption. It's huge. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about prescription medications renewed online, and that these big companies can continue to shell out. You opt in, you subscribe, and it's overprescribed. And the implication is there are cabinets across America full of drugs that will never be taken, that will never be consumed, because in this case, I'm expanding the conversation beyond these minority communities and this type of fraud. We're talking about big companies now, because they just keep pumping out the pills on the subscription and charging and charging and charging, and there's no end consumer for this amount of demand that's being pumped out. The large part of what I'm getting at is there's fraud everywhere, is there not? In Medicare and Medicaid, it's got to be gigantic.
We believe it's well over $100 billion. And to your point, because we're the largest operating business, so to speak, we dole out, if you add the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare monies that we dole out, it's probably $2 trillion that passes through these doors. So there's a lot of opportunities for bad players to target us. We're like a big, hippopotamus wandering through the jungle, and people are taking shots at us, and they can get a beneficiary number. Right? If you're one of the 68 million people on Medicare or the 72 million people on Medicaid, someone can get your number and they can begin to use that to weaponize it against us. You can get a provider's number, doctor's ID number, and even if they're unaware, they'll still start getting big checks that can get diverted to a different bank account and get shipped overseas. And for this reason, we've got a lot of departments in the government working together. Scott Bessent and I are working together trying to deal with some of the bank fraud issues. And by the way, when these guys break the law, they don't just break the law in healthcare. They steal the money from healthcare because it's an easy target, but they do wire fraud. They're sending money back overseas where they can do untoward things. They get involved in other businesses. They just steal money. And they are financing their operations by the easiest target of all, which is Medicare. Now, what's the solution? Because I am more optimistic about this than any other time that I think I've been alive. Why? First, in surgery, the first thing you do, Will, when someone calls you in to help, is you open the wound and you shine the light in. You got to understand what the problem is. We have a better understanding of the magnitude of this fraud, in part because of the president and Secretary Kennedy, because they are crusading on this topic. They're so upset about the fact that we're stealing from our most vulnerable. We're hurting the people who need the help the most. So we've identified the magnitude of the problem. We're getting a better grasp on it. Now we've got the difficult task of getting folks. A lot of states don't want to hear from us because it's a business model. If I'm paying the salaries for the most employed people in New York State, right? Well, then why would I want to cut that fraud out? The federal government's paying money to my citizens, and that money goes into the economy and helps us in other ways. So, I'm not going to crack down on that. If I was the governor of California and I'm watching billions of dollars of federal dollars come into my coffers, some of it maybe go on to the wrong people, but it's okay because they'll spend money in our communities. They buy hamburgers and beds and the like, so they'll generate commerce. So it's not a flaw; it's a feature of the system that is not working well. But the big benefit we have, Will, is what the banking industry noticed as well. Bank managers don't detect fraud well because they're not fraudsters, but AI does. AI is able to think like a fraudster and identify aberrancies better than anyone else could do by hand. We're using these same tools now in government. We have not sent out billions of dollars of money that were charged to us because we're identifying these. And then we're going to the root cause. We want to take out folks who are using political patronage as a motivating tool who are not trying to enforce the law. That's why I'm going after Governor Newsom if he's not going to take this seriously. And we've sent letters threatening to defer future revenue based on the track record in Minnesota and in California. We want them to fix the problem. And if they don't fix the problem, we're going to defer Medicaid payments. Now, you can use the ability for CMS to regulate to go after people, but you can also use the tool we have that we make the payments. So if we don't pay the bills, you're going to start listening to us. Again, we're not asking you to do anything you wouldn't or shouldn't want to do for yourself. You should want to fix this problem if you're leading one of our states.
All right. Well, we wish you the best of luck. It's a bear. And the ultimate victim in all of this is the taxpayer. Just nonsense money going out the door everywhere. $100 billion, that's huge. Dr. Mehmet Oz, we wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
God bless you, Will.
All right, take care. All right, before we go today, let's revisit. First, let me address the militia. So Sharon Houston on Facebook says, Biden and Harris created this chaos with their illegal aliens entering our country through their open borders, endangering Americans. I've traveled on pilgrimages, and this I know. I was not allowed into any country without my passport in hand. Laws are laws in place for a reason. And then Sean Townsend says, we can do so much for Americans if we have a secure border. Let the educated people come in, like the Iranians. Well, we have a secure border. We have a secure border. Now we have a secure border. Now you have to figure out what happened in that interim, everything that came in while it was wide open. Jeff Fish says on Facebook, the Grammys are for stupid people. And Steve Rappa says, we voted for law and order. That means our borders are secure and people here must follow law. No more Biden crime will be tolerated. That's hearing from you, the Willisha. So back to our story of the day, 2 days. So is it an 8-inch artillery shell found in a man's rectum? They got to clear the hospital because, hey, even though it's from World War I guess it's live ammo. It could go off.
This was
go ahead, Tinfoil. You have some expertise. You have some expertise
So
on this fetish?
I don't have expertise, but Dave Spagelberg said
Spaggy.
8-inch diameter is not uncommon. Battleship guns are 12 to 16 inches.
Uncommon for what?
Might be
I'd say it's uncommon for
rectums.
this particular use.
Yeah. What are you talking about, dog?
I think he's saying it's not uncommon to be in existence, but I think it would be uncommon for this application.
Yeah. Also, this was an episode of Grey's Anatomy, by the way. Did you know that?
Really?
Yes.
No.
This
Yeah.
literal situation was an episode in Grey's Anatomy. A very, very popular episode.
And I'm not going to tell you what happens, but
Maybe that's.
my boy Kyle Chandler's in that episode, so love him.
Does it go off? Does it go off?
Damn it, Will.
May or may
The
not go
artillery
off.
shell?
Yeah.
Really? Do you think that these dudes got their idea from Grey's Anatomy? Because I want to know, like, if you really want to know my curiosity,
I'll search the
I
Reddit
would
boards.
like fly on the wall camera when the guy decides, that would be interesting. You know, like he's looking across the room. He's got his memorabilia. He's got his collection of things that he's, had over life. Maybe he's got, a helmet or a vintage, what was the rifle? Carbine, M1 carbine?
M1,
World War I?
yeah.
I don't know. And he's looking over there and he sees that shell and he goes, it could be fun. I want to know.
Why a live explosive?
That moment.
What are you doing?
The risk, baby.
I
risk.
guess, but god dang.
I think he's probably not even thinking that it's live. I think he's thinking, look at the shape of that thing. That's what I'm
You can
guessing.
find anything that's shaped like that. It doesn't have to explode.
I just want to know what two dudes.
how many things are shaped
have now
like that,
come up
Dan?
with this idea? At least two.
Shut up.
Did we confirm it's not the same guy, right? He didn't go back for a second round.
That would be true life. I'm addicted to putting bombs in my rectum.
This guy's only 24, so I doubt this is the same guy.
Yeah.
Because that was, 4 years
I
ago?
think in 21, if I remember that story correctly, it was an older man that did it. I believe, if I
88-year-old
remember that
man.
story correctly.
Connor just
That's
fact search.
insane. Another degree of difficulty. Insane.
It's kind of like Legos. They have, the
88.
ages on it. Like 10 to 99.
the flexibility at 88.
Interesting.
Tell me more about that, Dan.
No, I don't know. What? I'm just trying to imagine
All right.
how this would happen, but I don't
Now,
want
people
to anymore.
said
Let's
no
just-
initial explanation as to why the shell ended up in the man's body, but local media speculated that it might have had something to do with his social life.
Maybe someone did it to him. We don't know he did it to himself.
Maybe it's like a jackass
Fair.
situation. He fell asleep.
Fair.
We don't know he did it to himself.
Yeah.
Fair.
Instead of drawing with Sharpie,
Fair.
they put artillery up his butt.
Yeah.
Solid joke.
Yeah. He had to have been heavily sedated, I would assume.
Got him.
let's just, assuming that's not the case for one moment, let's end the show today with a public service announcement. Please do not put World War I or World War II era ammunition up your rectum.
Please don't.
After that, the world is wide open to you. If you can find modern, whatever, we're going to sit with the problem we have today. World War I and World War II era ammunition. All right, thanks for joining us here today on that PSA. That's going to do it for us. Make sure you subscribe at Spotify or Apple or YouTube, and we'll see you again next time.